Hello and welcome back for another installment in our Courtroom Confidential Conversation series. For this episode, please join me in welcoming Esther Ludlow of the fan favorite podcast, Once Upon a Crime. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I've been looking forward to this. I thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know that podcasting is a full-time job of yours, and so I know how many hours that can involve, especially when it's a one-person show and you're writing and producing and editing everything yourself. And I want to get into all of that, but I thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I have been as well.
One thing that we get a lot of feedback from people on when we do these conversations is they've been a fan of people like yourself for so long, of Once Upon a Crime podcast for so long, but they don't know all that much about the person themselves. I mean, especially in a podcast like yours where it's just you, there's very little opportunity for you to kind of talk about your background because you're usually talking about the subject matter. So this is one of the things I've really appreciated about doing this series that we have of these conversations, is just to get to know the person. So I'm going to start there. Could you tell us a little bit about, kind of where you grew up, what your background was?
Yeah, so I grew up here in the San Francisco Bay Area where I still live. I lived first in a little town called Milpitas, which a lot of people probably haven't heard of, but it's outside of San Jose. And yeah, I've after that I kind of been all over after that, but I've always come back to California. So this is kind of my stomping ground, if you will. But I did move around a little bit. I lived in Massachusetts for a little while. I lived up in Sacramento for a while, and then came back here probably when I was in high school. I've been here pretty much, yeah, into high school, young adulthood, when I came back to this area. Yeah.
How about school and all of that? Did you go away for any of that?
Yes, no, I went to a lot of high schools, but by the time I finally went to college, I went back to school as an adult. I got married very young and had a daughter, and, so that kind of, took me in a different direction, was just working and raising my daughter, and I was a single mom pretty quickly, did that for a lot of years, just working, but I went back to school later on because I was always a big school nerd, so I had to, and, I went to college here in California. I went to Holy Names University up in the Oakland Hills, which is a beautiful area, and then I got my graduate degree at Santa Clara University, also here in the Bay Area.
What was your pursuit in school? What was the plan when you went to school and got your higher education?
My biggest plan was to find a degree that didn't require a lot of math because I'm terrible at
Same. I
I like to
basically
read, I
follow
like
that
to
same role.
write, I did not like numbers. So, but, to be serious, I was always very, very interested in human psychology, especially criminal psychology, and that started early on in high school, and this is probably a question you're gonna ask, but my very first entry into that was a book called The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule about Ted Bundy, which people know, it's very, famous. And I found that when I was in high school in a paperback form, I think. This had to be, oh gosh, early mid 1980s. And yeah, that was just fascinating to me. And ever since then, I could not get enough of trying to pick apart the criminal brain. So I went to school for psychology and got a bachelor's degree in psychology, got a master's in counseling psychology, and actually started working with juveniles in the juvenile justice system, counseling them and their families, and working with them as they entered back into society. I also worked as a teacher while I was getting my graduate degree in juvenile hall. So had
Wow.
a lot of exposure to, kids and why they get into, the criminal behavior and things like that, how they get out of it or not. So that was always very interesting to me. But I thought if I started with them younger, maybe I had a better shot at keeping them, away from the criminal lifestyle for the long term.
Yeah.
That was kind of my thought behind it.
Talk to us a little bit about that experience, because when I was in the prosecutor's office, at least when I was there, they would have everyone do a 1-year stint through juvenile hall where we would just deal with minors and juvenile cases. And I got to tell you, it was eye-opening and also very heartbreaking. I mean, you
Yeah.
see a lot of these kids who are doing, first of all, very awful things. I mean,
Mhm.
any adult crime you can think of, juveniles are also committing, which is shocking.
Right.
But also the kind of the motivations behind it. They're dealing with, not fully developed brains,
Right.
emotions they can't entirely control. It certainly gave me a different perspective on like, wow, these kids are, as much of victims, though they've victimized others,
Mhm.
they're as much of victims of kind of their circumstances and upbringing and everything else. But please tell us about your experience and how you found all of that work.
Yeah, for sure, and the thing is some of these kids, it's like they can't even escape that. It's very, very difficult because the kids that I worked with, I would say the majority of them were gang involved,
Yeah.
and, they came from generations of gang involvement. So their
Yeah.
parents and even their grandparents, were involved in gangs. So that's what they grew up in. They grew up in these neighborhoods that you basically, you get affiliated early to a gang, and, that's what you do. I mean, has to do with the situations they're in, the economics they're in. It's also the environment, they're around that, and to them, that's what you do. Now, there was a few, of course, that really, did their best to stay out of that, but it's still difficult. And so the problem was that I saw is these kids then get, like you said, they do, drive-by shootings. They do, violent, robberies and things like that. They do all kinds of things. Of course, drugs are a big thing. And they get caught up and they get arrested and they get put in the juvenile detention. And they if they're lucky, they get exposed to something different, at least temporarily. Um, Me and other teachers there, that was kind of our role besides educating them, was talking to them about doing, things differently, or at least just seeing a different perspective. And, that was something that was always really interesting to me because you find out their stories and you can find something in them that is their strength or is there, something unique about them, and that's just how I've always been wired anyway, is I always wanna know everybody's story. It's like, "Oh my god, you know how to do that?" Like, "Oh, wow, you're a great writer. Oh my gosh, I wish I could draw like you." I'm always, like, very impressed with people, and so that was kind of the way it unfolded when I worked with kids, and that would get them excited about actually life, doing something different. Now the problem is once they leave there, because that's only temporary, they go back to the exact same environment that they came from. So that's the tough thing. Um, and you just hope that at some point, maybe what they experienced that was different will click and they'll decide, you know what, I don't want this life anymore. I want something else. But,
Yeah.
it's tough. And yeah, you said it's heartbreaking. It was really tough for me. I think I was working there, oh gosh, maybe it was a little almost 2 years, and I finally was like, "This is rough, man." Like, I had a son at home who was like a preteen, and I could see my son in a lot of these kids, and it was just really, really heartbreaking, and
Yeah.
I knew that they didn't have that kind of support and encouragement and, a safe home. So yeah, it became a lot. So that's why I went into counseling. I thought, well, let me do this outside of, being locked up because you are locked up with them. I mean, make no mistake about it, you're locked in there with them. That is your experience every day, but you get to go home. And
Yeah.
so I thought, well, let me do something on the outside. So, finished my degree and started working with families.
I will say that I think I totally agree with you. It's a emotionally exhausting experience, and I
Mhm.
think that's why they had the rotation at the DA's office when I was there of only 1 year because they don't want somebody to have that assignment for longer than that because they realize how kind of tough it can be to live with that day in, day out. And there is this feeling of there's maybe an opportunity here. It
Mhm.
might be a short, small window of opportunity that we have to perhaps impact this young person to change the course of their life. Because, like you said, once they reach the age of majority, once they're
Yeah.
18 years old, if they still continue down this same life of crime, then they're dealing with big boy court, and then they're
Yep.
going to adult court, and then we're talking about decades in prison, and really that becomes much harder to kind of remove them from that lifestyle.
Yeah.
So after your time there, you said I don't know if I can deal with this on a day-to-day basis, but you still had a desire to be involved in counseling and families and everything
Mhm.
else. Tell us about that experience. How long did you do that? What did that involve?
Yeah, so that was the thing. I went to school to get a master's in counseling, and the route would be normally to get your MFT and go into working for, an agency or something like that where you're, licensed therapy kind of thing. I kind of realized with the population that I was working with, it wasn't the best model, at least in my opinion. At least the specific population I was working with. So therapy is great and I'm a big advocate for it, but in certain populations, it's pretty limited. They're not ready for that. They're ready for things that concrete. What can I do today to actively do something different or work towards a goal or something like that. So I created my a business that was kind of like a blend between coaching and counseling. So like kind of like that, remember life coaching thing, but it was kind of like that, but not quite. And counseling. And I did that. I just kind of started working with people. I knew that there was this population and the families that were trying to help their kids stay, away from, the criminal lifestyle and stay away from what they were doing, drugs and get back to school and all that kind of stuff. They needed help. They didn't know exactly where to start. It's a lot, so that's what I did. I started working with families who were and, one-on-one with these kids and with the families as well to try to see if we could change some things and get these kids to see a future and then start moving towards it. So, it was very, hands-on, it was very experiential for the kids, and that worked really well for me, and I did that probably, oh gosh, it was like 7 or 8 years because I graduated in 2008, and then in 2016 is when I launched the podcast. And that was really just something to do to not be working. To do something, that was fun and something I enjoyed and, get my mind away from there's a lot of heavy stuff you deal with. So,
Yeah.
and the funny thing is to get away from the heavy stuff I deal with, I
I
started,
was just, I
like,
was
doing true crime. So,
right.
that
You
just
turn
tells you
to
a little bit more
the
about me than you need
lighthearted
to know.
world of true crime. Yeah. I want to get into that because I didn't want to miss this. You mentioned it earlier, but you said that one of the first things that stuck out to you and kind of stuck with you was reading Anne Rule's book, The Stranger Beside Me. And a lot of people point to that book. If you're a fan of true crime nonfiction literature, that's one of the books that's in your top five, I imagine. Tell us, though, for people who aren't familiar with the book, what it's about, because it's a unique
Mhm.
perspective from the author uh, by far.
Right.
And then what it was about that started to attract you to this world of storytelling in the true crime genre.
Mhm. Yeah, well, that book by Anne Rule, it was her first true crime book that she did, and the reason why it was about Ted Bundy was because she knew Ted Bundy. She actually had worked with Ted Bundy at a suicide crisis hotline of all things, and she worked overnight shifts with him. She thought he was this young law student. She was, she was, I believe, a mother at that time already and was working towards a degree, or she had finished her degree. I can't remember which. But, she was this was something she was doing, and she met Ted, answering phones, and it was the 2 of them, and they would, wait and answer calls, so in between calls, they would chat. She got to know him, thought he was this great guy, and all of this. So, fast forward when she hears that he has been arrested for a attempted kidnapping and rape, and, and of course, can't believe that this like everybody thought at the beginning with Ted Bundy, this has to be, a mistake. This is a mistake. This is
Right.
not this guy. But as time and she continued to be in touch with him. He would write her letters from jail. She was corresponding with him. And over time, of course, she came to understand that he did do the things he was accused of. and then having to process that and figure out what to do with that when she thought she knew this person. And to me, that was so interesting because and she does a great job in all her books, she did a great job, of talking about the backstories of the perpetrators and the victims, and to me, that kind of informed me a little bit about how things unfold or maybe even why a little bit. Now, we don't ever know for certain, but it gives us, room to think about, like, how does this happen and how do we avoid it? And that was kind of part of what I ended up doing in my career was how do people start going down a life of crime and how do we avoid it?
Mm.
How do we, set that off at the past somehow? Of course, it was way too late for Ted Bundy, but it was looking at that and picking apart the psychological profile of a perpetrator that was so interesting to me, and I just wanted more of that. So as soon as I finished reading that book, I'm looking for more true crime books, and there wasn't a lot, but it that kind of started my journey about that. I think at the time there was maybe a few true crime authors and there was unsolved mysteries or something.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot more, but yeah, that kind of got me started, and it was really a lifelong fascination with that question is how does a person become a perpetrator, and is there a way that we can avoid that, or if not, that we can inform ourselves so that so we don't become victims.
And that's a huge question. I feel
Yeah.
like we could spend hours just contemplating that. But flash forward now, you said, you've got this fascination. You read the books. It's kind of an itch in the back of your brain. You go through your time in counseling and in private practice, and you said in 2016 something got into your head, and you decided, I'm going to start this podcast. And I want to know about that moment because that's quite a leap, and it does seem like today everybody's got a podcast,
Yeah.
but including the governor of our own state. But talk to us about what inspired you. What did you plan to do with it? Why did you feel like this is a gear shift I want to take in my life?
So yeah, I launched in 2016, but I'd actually been planning it for years. So it was something I actually started podcasting in 2012.
Mm.
And that was just a little podcast I was doing. It was kind of like giving people tips, like because out of my counseling business, like talking to parents. It was just a little short, podcast about things that came up while I was doing counseling, like maybe these will be helpful for parents to know and families to know. So I did that for a little bit of time because I was just a big fan of podcasts. I used to started out with like the news and politics podcasts, and there wasn't any true crime podcasts really at the time, but it took me a
Which is
while to find
incredible.
any.
Not to interrupt you, but that's incredible to think about
Yeah,
because that genre of podcast
yeah,
now is huge. But
yeah.
there
There
was a time when it's
couldn't
like
find one.
nobody was really doing that.
No, no, there wasn't a lot, and I did look. So there was a couple, and we'll talk about that when we get to that. But it was so I just at 2012, I thought, well, I love listening to podcasts. That sounds like fun to talk, and record and all of that. So I learned very piecemeal on my own. There was also no schools of podcasting, you guys. You had to figure it out on
Right.
your own. What's an RSS feed, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
I mean, it was really, really primitive in 2012. So um, so I figured it out, and I'm not a technical person at all, but I just thought it'd be fun. So I figured that out, and the audio, as you know, is notoriously difficult at times and challenging, and but yet still was able to do it. But I did that short-lived podcast for a while, and I thought, I wanted podcasting to be fun. This is more work, and I don't want to do because I was talking about my work, and I'm like, had
Mhm.
enough of that work. And I remember talking to my husband at the time and saying, um, you know, if I was gonna do a podcast for real, like for the long term, there's only one subject that I really think I'd like to do, and that be telling true crime stories because I know so many of them. I'm telling you, I cannot remember what I walk out the door and I can't remember what I'm supposed to be doing that day or, whatever. I can
Right.
remember details of a true crime case from 1977 that I heard in 1989. I can just, for whatever reason, it's like a steel trap about these things, which is totally useless information unless you use it, right?
Right.
So I thought, well, that would be cool, and so I thought about it, and I was putting, kind of putting it together in my mind, and, like I said, I was still figuring out podcasting and all of that, but now I knew how to do it. So I thought, "Okay," and then finally, I had started my practice and all that kind of stuff, and I thought, "Well, I really wanna do a podcast. I think that would be really fun," and so think I started putting it together, like, maybe in 2013 or something like that, like, "Okay, start putting together the stories." Now I thought I was gonna do, because I read true crime a lot, I thought I was just, "Oh, I'll just talk to true crime authors." But, there was already somebody doing that. That Dan Zupansky was doing that. I would listen to that, and the other person that was doing a true crime podcast was the Generation Y, was Justin and Aaron, and they did cases, and it was 2 of them, and they would go through the case, and, and they didn't do a lot of chit chat, but, it was 2 of them that co-hosted, and I thought, I could do that, but I would do it on my own because I don't know that I could work well with another person. One of my worst things in college was group projects, like,
Right.
I like to do things my way. So,
Uh-huh.
it's like I just decided, "Okay, I think I'm gonna start this." I started writing a couple of scripts and figuring out the format and all that stuff, and, um, and I also realized really early on that I cannot speak very well just off the cuff, that I really need I'm a writer, first of all. First and foremost, I'm a writer, and I'm a communicator, but it's through writing. And so I started writing a script for each episode so that I could keep my thoughts in order and tell the story the way that I wanted it to unfold. So that was the way I did it. But even though I had all that ready to go, I thought, but who's gonna want to hear this? Like,
Right.
this
So
is
funny
pretty
that that's
dark.
a question. Yeah, back then, that was a question. Will people actually be interested in this
Yeah,
stuff?
and then I finally thought, it doesn't really matter. I'll enjoy it. Maybe I'll have
Mhm.
a couple 100 people listening, it'll be fine, whatever. If that, I'd be thrilled, because I had done the other podcast, and I honestly don't remember how many people listened, but it might have been like 1,000, or I don't know. It was something. And so I thought, "Okay, well, let me just do it," because right before that, what happened was Serial, the podcast, came out.
Yeah.
And that was huge. I mean,
Yeah.
it was ginormous. I had millions and millions and millions of people listening and following that case, and I realized 2 things upon, finding out about Serial and becoming a big fan of it myself, was number 1, that people did wanna hear this kind of content, and number
Mhm.
2, Serial ended after 10 episodes, I believe. I thought, "All those people are gonna be looking for more of this content. I gotta get this out now. I gotta get going," you know?
Yeah.
So, I, got the studio set up, and the funny thing, it all kind of just clicked into place. It's like those things that look back and you think, "Yeah, that was supposed to happen," because everything just kind of unfolded the way it was supposed to. I had just rented an office to do my counseling business, and in the back, there was this back storage room, and I thought, "Man, that would be perfect podcast studio." As soon as I saw it, I said, "Okay, I'm getting this, and I'm gonna turn that into a podcast studio." And so that's where Upon a Crime was born, was in this back storage unit of my counseling office. And I launched in June of 2016 with 3 episodes, and I decided to do, a series every month, like a topic every month. And the first one was called Lost and Found, and it was about people who were kidnapped and held for years, but then were rescued. And, so I did three different cases that was what happened, and put those out in June. And I think it was within the first week, I had, like, I'm trying to remember, I think it was like 1,400 people listened or something like that. I was like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
crazy."
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so that was amazing. But by the next month, I had actually met Justin from the Generation Y, who had come to San Jose to do a meetup, and somebody had told him, "Oh, she has a podcast," and he's like, "What?" He actually gave a shout out to me and other female true crime podcasters on his show. I had only been podcasting for a month, and I had 75,000 people listening
Wow.
because,
Wow.
Gen Y. So they're still my very best friends.
Yeah.
in podcast
Yeah.
land.
But just to jump in so people listening appreciate that. I mean, it sounds like a huge number, but it is an enormous number
Mm,
for that early on starting a podcast. So many people, and I know they've done analysis of this, and there's X amount of podcasts that only make it to episode 3 or 4 or something because people give up, because you find, even if you've got a fantastic idea, even if you're a fantastic person or personality, the podcasting world is so difficult to get people to just know that you exist because there are so many out there.
right.
And so many people, find themselves doing podcast after podcast to an empty room nearly.
Yeah.
It's their subscribers, their listeners are their significant other and their mom. And you can only go so many weeks on
And then
end
they
doing
stop
that before
listening.
you, right, right. And then they even give up on you. Yeah. So that tremendous success early on with an obviously a helpful boost from supporters is tremendous, and I want to talk about that. But it is funny how you point to Serial
Mhm,
being kind of a motivator for you and an inspiration. It is, podcasting with true crime did exist before them, but there was
mhm,
something about that show that I think really it really exposed the idea that, one, people, there is an audience for this, like you said,
mhm.
and two, people can follow a story for more than one episode,
Right.
right? That they can listen for weeks on end. And that they, even people who didn't entirely, I think, maybe it exposed a market that people didn't really know existed. This idea for kind of mysteries and solving things and understanding the complexities and details of a story. Because I was not a what I would call a true crime fan back when that came out, but I was an avid listener to that. I mean, I
Yeah,
couldn't wait for the next episode. It was just so engaging to hear this story, and not involving a celebrity, by the way.
right.
Adnan Syed is not a
Not a
football
no
player
name.
that we all heard of, not a known name, not a celebrity, but we were all just so fascinated with it. But
Mhm.
I kind of digress. I just wanted to kind of hit on
Yeah.
that
It
point
was
as
a
well.
phenomenon, it truly was. I
Yeah.
remember that, Sarah Koenig was on, The Daily Show. I was like, "Whoa, a
Yeah.
podcaster on The Daily Show?
Yeah.
What's going on?" And it
Yeah.
was so funny when podcasting did become a thing, you started seeing podcasters pop up on like, in a movie or on a
Yeah.
TV show, and we would call each other like, "Oh my god, there's a podcaster being,
Yeah.
represented on this show. That's crazy," because nobody even knew what it was. You know,
No.
like, I started telling people you did a podcast, they had no idea what you were talking about. They had none.
My wife started working for a podcast many years ago, and I remember not even quite understanding, what do you mean? It's like a radio show, but it's not live, but I have to listen to it, record it. It was it like, it kind of didn't fit into all of our square holes. We're like,
Yeah,
this is television and this is radio, but what is this podcast thing?
right.
And now you've got people like Joe Rogan,
Mhm.
one of the most influential people in media, and the
Right,
guy's, essentially a podcaster.
right.
Um, anyhow, getting though to that initial success and quick success that you had, when did the light bulb moment take place where you're like, oh, this isn't just a fun pastime I'm going to do in my storage room. This could actually turn into something, and there's an audience for this.
Yeah, I think that early on when I got that big bump and I had the listeners stayed with me, I thought, okay, because I was gonna do I do weekly podcasts, a different episode every week, a different case every week. And I thought, well, I'll do a couple a month, maybe I'll get that out or whatever. And I thought, man, I better go weekly on this. Like there's people listening while I have an audience. Let me just keep cranking these out. So that's what I did. So that was the first hurdle. And then I had done enough of them. I think it was probably, gosh, less than a year later. And again, I'm still running my counseling business, but I'm having less and less time to like find new clients and do all that because, like I said, I am researching and writing a script pretty much every week, which is funny because I was a graduate school and when I graduated, I thought, man, I'm so glad I'm never gonna have to write another paper again. And now I have to do one like almost every week. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really messed myself up there, but yeah, it's like So I thought, okay. And then I noticed I had this audience and I thought, this has to be worth something, to have these
Mm,
listeners. And again, there wasn't networks, podcast networks that you sign on and they find you advertise. There wasn't that yet, unless you were, I don't know, like a celebrity or something. You didn't get that. So, I mean,
mhm.
I hosted on Libsyn. I did everything myself. We figured it all out. Um, and that was it. So I actually reached out to a couple of people. I guess I Google searched a couple of people and thought, "Oh, podcast advertising, who sells ads?" And so I found a couple of, smaller businesses that had been doing it and people that had been in maybe in the radio space and had moved into podcasting to sell ads. And I said, "Can you sell ads?" And they're like, "How many downloads do you have?" And I told them, they're like, "Oh, heck yeah, we can sell ads." So that was it, and I started so when that started happening, then after, I don't know, a few months of that, I thought, "Well, I guess I just do this full time." I was actually making more money doing that than I was in my counseling business because it had dwindled because of so much time I was putting into the podcast.
That's
So, yeah,
incredible.
it just became that it was kind of unfolded. It wasn't any real light bulb moment. It was just like, "Huh, I wonder if
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to find out if I could make money doing this," that's really just how it unfolded.
Tell me about that leap though, because I hear of, variations of the same story from a lot of folks where they have a job and it's a good job. It's a
Mhm.
career, it's
Right,
not like they're just kind of struggling to make ends meet. They might be very established people in their own careers and they start this kind of side project journey with podcasting or YouTubing or whatever it is. And then, like you just explained, it kind of slowly starts to take over your life. And this isn't something that you can do part time. If you really
right.
want to do it well, it becomes part time just with the amount of effort you have to put into it. But tell us about that leap when you go, you know what? I'm actually going to stop this well established career that I went to school for so many years and that I built up a practice. And I'm going to kind of shutter that and go after this weird world of podcasting. Was
Yeah.
that nerve wracking? Did you have any trepidation?
Yeah, I think I'm well, I don't know if you call it lucky or different in that way. I've never been one to follow a set anything. Um, even with my count even when, I got my degree, like, everybody in my class was gonna go on to, get their MFT and do all of that, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't know if that really works for me." I think I wanna do
Mhm.
something different. I think I'm just gonna put out a shingle and see if I can get, clients that way, and, um, I have a very short attention span for a lot of things, but this was something it changes every week, it changes every week
Yeah.
what I'm doing. I had thought for a while, that I thought since I was a kid that I was gonna be a teacher, and when I started doing I was wanted to be a high school teacher, and when I started doing that in grad school as a substitute teacher, I realized, "Man, you gotta teach the same lesson plan every year. Like, I can't even do it every month. How am I gonna do that?" Like, so I mean, I give a lot of props to teachers. It's a hard job, and, there's so much you gotta hold the attention of a classroom, that alone is exhausting. I loved it, but I thought, "No, I don't think I could do that for the long term." So, I no matter what I was gonna do, I knew I was gonna have to create something on my own. And so this was just, "Yeah, I could do that. That'll work." I don't know. It was one of those things. I guess that may be where the light bulb moment kinda came in was I just knew that that's what I was supposed to do. Like, I just
Yeah.
knew that this was it. Like, if anybody thinks back to all of the times in their life and they think, "Man, I wish I would have known then this," or "I
Mhm.
wish, I had been in the right place at the right time at this, for this thing," like, whether it's investing in some company or, whatever, stocking, toilet paper before COVID, whatever, like it was that you
Right.
wish you had known. Um, and I feel like this is the one time in my life that it was like, "Man, I hit it." Like, I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill set and the right interests, and it all just unfolded the way that it was supposed to, and I even believe that my degree has a lot to do with what I'm doing now because I was doing, all of the criminal psychology and the motivations and the looking at all of that. And I do a lot of that in the stories on Once Upon a Crime because I do dive into motivation and personality and upbringing and all of those things that would play a factor in it to, I hope, put more interest into that story. I say what I say is I wanna do more than just the Law& and Order version, which I love Law& and Order, don't get me wrong, but the Law& and Order version is the crime, the investigation, and the trial, and the outcome, and
Mhm.
those are great, but it's like but I wanna mix that up, like, let's tell the story from a different point of view, or let's look at go deeper into the stories and find out what was going on here. So yeah, so that's all been great, but I think it all it all came together somehow. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that I I probably didn't know anything of what I was doing, but it came together, and I feel very, very lucky for that.
Oh, well, it sounds like it was one of those things where the old proverb, you find do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And it
Right.
sounds like you that kind of revealed itself to you. I'm glad that it did. You've been doing this for a while though. I mean,
Mhm.
you are one of the originals in true crime podcasting to the point, and this is one thing I wanted to ask about, but I want to ask how things have changed over the years. But you have the website, the URL truecrimepodcast.com, which I think is amazing.
Yeah,
I'm like, who actually owns that? You do.
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how that happened. But then more importantly, I'm curious, over the years that you've been doing this, how have things changed? How have they stayed the same? All of that.
Mhm. Yeah, that was funny because, I mean, I've had other, businesses when I was even when I was in grad school, I had I was doing tutoring, again, you do everything you have to do to make money when you're in grad school. I was tutoring, and so I had a website for that, I had a website for my counseling, so I'd always looked at domain names. I was always kind of like, I don't know, it was one of those things like, "Oh, I wonder if this domain name's available," or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when thought about doing the podcast, I thought, "Oh, truecrimepodcast.com, nah, that's not gonna be available. Oh my god, it's available." I got it immediately. Like and I
I just
sat with it
love
for a
that.
couple of
Yeah.
years, I think, before I finally started using it for, website, but I'm like, "Yeah, that is totally worth it." So, yeah, it was just, again, lucky, right place, right time. I was lucky. Nobody else had looked that one up. I don't know. But again, true crime podcasts were not a big deal yet. That was not
Right.
a thing yet, really. There was just a handful of us, and speaking of that, the beginnings of it was great because I got acquainted online and on a Facebook group. I don't know, somebody started it and a couple of us found it. It was all women true crime podcasters. And there
Mm.
was probably 6 of us. And it's like Nina from Already Gone and Charlie from Now at Crime Lines, and a couple of others, Brooke from Actual Innocence. I remember way back. And so that was like really cool to have this group of we're all starting this around the same time, and we're all kind of, comparing notes and supporting one another and all of this, and we all most of it almost all of us ended up at the very first crime con here in the US, which was in 2017 in Indianapolis, and so we finally got to meet for the first time, but that was amazing, because again, it's one of those, I don't know, I think it started off where we had like a maybe kind of a balance between the male podcasters, female podcasters in this genre, which, and some, of course, like sports and news and stuff was mainly, male hosts. So it was kind of cool to have that. And that I think in it how it changed was it's just gotten so big, then the very first crime con, I remember they invited the podcasters. Red Sea Adventures or whoever it was called us up or sent us messages and said, "Hey, we're starting this crime convention, and we'd really like you guys to be part of it. Would you come and we'll give you a table and in our podcast row, and if you just um, kind of announce it in your podcast and kind of promote it a little bit." So we're like, "Wow, that sounds really cool." So we did that, and it was so great because, like I said, we hadn't met each other, but we were fans of each other's podcasts. I remember the first day that we set up, it was just the creators were there and everybody's walking around podcast, row setting up their tables and stuff. And we'd stop. It's like, "Oh my god, I know your voice. Oh my god, I know your voice." It's like so it was like this surreal moment where we all were fans of each other, but then we all became really good friends as well, so that was awesome. That was really cool,
That
and,
is cool.
yeah, and I guess how it's changed well, podcasting has changed. It was very much a grassroots effort, word of mouth, just a few creators, do it yourself kinda thing, independent, and now it's just gotten huge. I mean, there's
Oh,
networks and corporations and celebrity driven and a lot of money in there, depending on what and they're putting a lot of money behind the bigger names. So we do have to kind of fight through all of that to continue to for people to find us and to continue to have our podcast grow. Things change in as far as the technical side of it that sometimes to our detriment because sometimes it'll knock, subscribers off our platforms and things, and we have to try to gather them back. You know, sponsorships are still great. People still really want to be advertisers on podcasts. But of course, there's a lot more money in there, and they're dividing it between, all the bigger shows, we're going to give them more, whatever. But I think as long as we're smart about how we invest in our podcasts and how we, do those things that will still, keep our heads above water here. But yeah, we really try to support each other and, you know, shout out each other and do collaborations and do crime cons and meet fans and all of those things. So there's a lot of opportunity in true crime. I mean, I'm sure you know
yeah,
from talking to all these podcasters, there's a lot out there.
yeah. I want to hear more about CrimeCon because, to your point, that was one of the things that convinced me that there is really this kind of ever growing audience for this true crime world. Um, I had heard about CrimeCon, wasn't quite sure what it was,
Yeah.
didn't know what I had it pictured in my head. What exactly do you have at a convention about crime? You know, so I went to my first crime con in Nashville, which was last year,
Oh yeah.
and with zero kind of expectations of what it would be, and I was blown away. It was so wild, and the community of people are so enthusiastic and friendly. And it really is kind of this fan environment where people are getting to meet their podcast hosts for the first time or YouTubers or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then also a very victim centric and appreciative of the world that we're dealing with is a very serious world. But I'm curious, how have you seen through crime kind? I think is probably a good barometer. How have you seen kind of the true crime world grow?
Yeah, I mean, that Nashville one, that one was huge.
Yeah.
They've grown every year since they started in 2017, and, yeah, that one was a little overwhelming, honestly. There were so many people, and, we have been used to kind of, "Oh, we podcast row," you get a trickle of people, and then you get more, and then you get more, and it was like, boom, the second they opened those doors, it was, like, overrun with people
Yeah.
wanting to, meet you and talk to you about true crime, and it's great, but man, it's a lot. Especially when you're a podcaster who sits by yourself, hours and hours a week, like all this energy coming at you. It's fun, but man, it's exhausting. But yeah, I think what I've seen how I've seen that change too is that there's, again, just a lot more going on there with a lot of creators. We got TV networks there now and all of that. Um, but also I've seen a change in the audience. Before I would swear it had to be 92% women that went to true crime conventions, and now you see a lot more men, and you
Mm,
see all different ages. You see people there with their kids. You see, families. A lot of times it's family members of victims, or people that have been victimized in some way. Who again, there's a lot of I believe, you get this kind of people that are outside of that population, like haven't been to CrimeCon or haven't been around people that are like people that follow true crime. They have this stereotype or idea that people are very ghoulish and you're making money or entertainment on, these tragedies or whatever. And of course there could be some of that, I mean, that's in any genre, right? There are people that maybe are not as tactful as they could be in some cases about things, but um, what I see is there's a lot of healing that goes on in those
Mm,
because people kind of realize that it's not just me that's had this experience, and there are other people that want to know my story and don't shy away from me because even family members of victims have a hard time, like they maybe want to talk about something that happened to them. They were assaulted or robbed or hurt in some way. And people don't want to hear it because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to react. They don't know what to say. But you'll see these people in these audiences that come, they've been immersed in this and they do like know how to approach and they know how to say, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." And it really, you hear this over and over. It's like that is so helpful to me. Or even knowing like if they have a missing family member, that there are other people that are going through this, and maybe finding tips and things like how do we continue to advocate for our missing loved ones or people trying to find justice for their loved ones. There's a lot that goes on there, and you see a lot more of the advocacy happening. And for me, people ask about that. It's like I don't like stand on a soapbox about anything. I feel like telling the stories in the most respectful way I can of the victims without shying away from who the perpetrators are, what they've done, is important so people can see that these things are real and these things happen, and there are victims and there are people that have been hurt by it. But I also feel that the awareness of it is so important because
yeah,
otherwise we live in this bubble and think nothing can ever happen to us, and we miss warning signs, that really red flags, even in relationships with other people that we know, because as we know, most people are victims of people they know, not strangers.
yeah.
So, seeing those kind of things or hearing those kind of stories, I think helps everybody to be aware of, how to keep themselves safe, number one, and how to keep their loved ones safe.
Yeah, and you're right. There's a fine line, but I think easily walked if you're compassionate and considerate of telling the stories, talking about kind of the fascinating nature of some of these crimes, but also just not turning it into a spectator sport and realizing that it's affected real people's lives.
Yeah.
Um, but you haven't just stayed in the world of podcasting.
Yeah.
You've also ventured out, and now you are on YouTube. Tell us about when that started, and that is a whole different animal.
I had to look back because I didn't remember exactly when we did that. It seemed like, "Oh, isn't it just a couple of years ago?" No, it's been a while. I think it was 20, I wanna say 2018, I think was when we
Okay.
first launched it, and this came out in a funny way. So, like I said, I'm here in San Francisco Bay Area, and a teacher that's here, up the peninsula from where I live, reached out to me, a high school teacher, and she said, "I'm such a big fan of your podcast." She goes, "And I have this high school class, I do psychology, and we're actually doing a unit about, like, criminal profiling, FBI profiling, whatever." She said, "It would be so great." She goes, "I know this is a big ask, but would you come to my class and speak about, what and I said, "I would love to because I used to be a high school teacher and I haven't been in front
Uh-huh.
of a high school class in a while. That'd be fun." So I went and, did it and it was great. And at the end of it, no, during the questions, somebody asked, "Do you have a YouTube channel?" I said, "No, I'm a podcaster," right? And this one of the students came up to me at the end. He goes, "You are on YouTube." I go, "What?" And he showed me, he goes, "You have like, I think he said you have like something like 600 subscribers." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I look Somebody had poached my audio and threw it up on YouTube,
Wow.
you know?
Wow.
And so my producer, I have a producer now, Lorena. She's been with me for, gosh, I think after, gotta be 6 years or now, I think something. I'd have to ask her. I don't remember. Again, numbers, me and numbers are not good. But she so she said, "Oh," she got upset right away. She's like, "That is wrong," and so she went to YouTube and made sure it got taken down and this and that. She goes, "Well, we had subscribers. Let's start a YouTube channel." I go, "Oh, that's fine. If you wanna throw the audio up there, that's great." So at first it was just, our static logo with the audio. You put it up there because that's all they had, right? And
Mhm.
but then Lorena decided, let's go ahead and make videos for this. So she's the mastermind behind the videos. I do the audio, she puts the videos together, and we've been doing so she started doing those, and we're now going back and doing some of the older ones as well. But I think it was around, oh gosh, I can't remember. It's got to be at least 2 years, something like that, that our weekly, podcasts we've turned into documentary style videos. So she puts those together, and those are amazing. And then we kind of even revolve that a little bit beginning at the end of last year, where I actually appear on camera. My agent will say, "You need to be on there." People like to connect with the host of the channel. I'm like, "Ugh." I've always been anonymous. Always been anonymous. Do I have to? And she's like, "Yes, it'd be a good idea." But now I'm finding it pretty fun. I enjoy it. I'm not there on the whole thing. I'm not sitting there just, talking to a microphone and doing the audio, but I'll, come in and do clips and then just, add in between of all of the pictures you're seeing and the things from the case that I'm covering. So that's been really fun. So we've got like 17,000 subscribers now, which is
Fantastic.
amazing. We again didn't think, but put it out there, see what happens, kind of thing, and that's been really cool. But man, every time I watch the videos, I'm impressed. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
Because again, I
yeah.
have nothing to do with that really, except for providing the audio story.
Well, for someone who wanted to remain, anonymous, you've also, though, been even beyond the world of YouTube. You've done some, I don't know if you wanna call them documentaries or docu-series type things.
Yeah.
I wanna give some of the credits here so people can find them. You've, been a part of History's Greatest Heists,
Yes.
Very Scary People,
Mhm,
The Real Murders of LA.
mhm.
Tell us about how that experience has been, because now we're not just talking a webcam
Yeah,
and your producer goes and kind of throws something together. Now we're talking about actually going on set and interviews and everything else.
yeah.
How have you enjoyed that?
That's been crazy and very surreal. People these are all just people that have reached out to me. It was nothing that was pitched to outside or anything like that. They just said, "Hey, we found Once Upon a Crime. We think you do great stories, and we'd like you to come on, this show as, to talk about this case." The first one I did was History's Greatest Heists with Pierce Brosnan. And that was the first season. I think there was episode 1 and 3 that I was on. Those That was the first one I did. It was really funny because they were doing, filming in London, and I happened to be in London, or was going to be in London for CrimeCon UK, which I've done since they
Mhm.
started. About I think it's the 4th year now for CrimeCon UK, in London, and I said, "Yeah, I'm actually gonna be there," and they're like, "Oh, great, let's get you scheduled for then." Well, because I was in London for, that day before I left, I actually filmed 2 back-to-back, uh, episodes, completely different cases. I mean, talk about my brain being fried at the end of that was so hard. And it was great, you're in this warehouse and you've got this light on you and you feel like you're being interrogated, but, it's and you're just going through the entire story and trying to remember all the details. And these were 2 cases that I had not covered myself personally. So it was a little bit more homework for me in the beginning anyway. Um, and then so that one, and then the second one I believe was the Very Scary People that I did we did the Trailside Killer. So that was a series that they did, and I had covered that, as a 3-part series myself on Once Upon a Crime, and so I was much more, versed on that, and that was really fun. It's really great to work with. They were actually, thank God, have to, film here in the Bay Area. I'm lucky because 'cause I'm in California, because usually I'm either going somewhere they're doing it local, or it's down in Los Angeles, which is not, I can take a 30-minute, 40-minute plane ride and be there. So yeah, so those have been really, really interesting. I guess I've been once you're there and I'm just kind of telling the story, it's been fun. It's been really good. It's cool to work with these crews. I mean, they set up, they know what they're doing, like tell you exactly what to do and how to stand, and they're doing B-roll with you and all this, and you're learning all these things, and it's been fun. But man, talk about surreal, seeing yourself on television and, seeing like my grandkids like, "Oh, there's my Mimi on Very Scary People," or whatever, which is really kind of funny. Like, "You let them watch that." Like, it's okay.
Right.
I
Yeah.
had to. It was their grandmother. I'm like, "Oh god."
I love that.
Yeah.
What's next? Do you have plans for anything new you want to get into, or are there stories that you're looking into for the podcast? Do you have anything you could share with us?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot new. So I've been doing Once Upon a Crime, like I said, this will be finishing up 9 years in June, and it's already 350 episodes. And I've done except for a few, um, a few times I've done them like one case per episode, right? And I've done a few like two-parters or three-parters, but having to research and write and narrate a different case every week takes like every minute of my time. Like
I'm
there's
sure.
no time for anything else. And there's lots of projects that I have been putting together for a while and in pre-planning stages and things like that. And I thought, okay, the only way I'm gonna be able to do that is to kind of do this a different way. So I'm really excited because I am what I'm going to be doing instead of doing the like the and it's also easier, I think, for people to find and stick with the show when it's like a longer, like we were talking like serial. It's like one case over several episodes, maybe over a season or something like that. And so there have been cases like that I wanted to cover, but I knew I needed more time and I wanted to do more things like interviews and, dive deeper into research and records and things like that. So I am actually planning for this next season, which begins this summer, is to start doing that. Like instead of doing individual episodes, doing long form series, like probably 3 a year. Well, I'll take one case, and they're all very different. The ones I'm looking at, the ones that I'm have pretty much decided on the first one, but the other ones I'm looking at. But I think that will be really fun, and I think I'll be able to do more. And plus, that'll give me a chance in between to have some time off because I am working on a book as well. I did just this couple of months ago, beginning of the year, a three-part series called Murder City, and that was about Santa Cruz, California, between 1970 and 1973, when you had two serial killers and a mass murderer all working at the same time in this little tiny
Wow.
beach community, which was why? What is going on here? It was mind-blowing, and that's right up the street from me, right up the hill from me in Santa Cruz. And so I did that, but there was so much on the research that I did that I couldn't put into the podcast that I decided that has to be the book because I've been wanting to write a book for a long time, and I thought that I have so much already written that I couldn't do, that I could put that together in a book, but I need that time to be able to do that. So that's the other thing, as well as looking into, even maybe working on some television, like docuseries and things like that. Because I have so many stories. So, and I want to be able to tell them. And I think that is my strong suit is really the storytelling. And so I want to be able to have more time to develop those stories. And really, so people can follow those things because I love that. I love that myself.
Yeah.
I get so hooked on true crime, series that they're telling one story over some amount of time. And I thought, God, I want to do that now too. I think, I mean, and if people like the one case per episode, I have 350 of them, so you're
Right.
not gonna run out. There's
Right.
plenty there, and we'll keep reminding you like, "Oh, and this reminds me of this episode that we did," or whatever. So that's kind of what I'm very excited about that. And there'll be a lot more coming for sure. Like, I am in no way done with this true crime thing. There's a lot more I wanna get to, and I think it's gonna be great, and I love doing the collaborations with other people. There's things we're looking at, doing as well, so, we'll just see how that again, like when I started Once Upon a Crime, we'll see how it unfolds. I'm sure it'll all
Yeah.
work out the way it's supposed to.
I'm sure that it will. I'm excited for you, and I'm looking forward to a lot of the projects you just mentioned. That's great stuff, especially the book. Good for
Yeah,
you. That'll
yeah,
be quite an adventure,
it
and
will.
that's something that you haven't got dipped your toes into yet. You've
No,
done the
no,
podcast, you've done the YouTube. Now you need to get into
yeah.
books.
I've done a lot of
Um,
writing, but I need to put it together as
yeah,
a book now.
love it, love
Yeah,
it. Tell us with the last few minutes I have with you here. I mean, obviously, if no one's going to forget this, True Crime Podcast is .com is where you
yeah.
can go to find about your podcast and everything else. But is there any other social media or anything else that you want to direct people towards?
Yeah, so they can get all the links on truecrimepodcast.com. Everything's there, including our YouTube channel, all of our, we have Facebook group, Facebook, Instagram. What else do we have? TikTok. And that's pretty much all Lorena. She does a lot of our social media. I'll put some things out there. I'll put some things about me and my French bulldog, people like that, stuff like that. But as far as, clips and stories and all that kind of stuff, she works on all of that. But yeah, True Crime Podcast is where you can find everything. Our YouTube channel, of course, Once Upon a Crime, uh, is a podcast. Just look for Once Upon a Crime podcast on there. You'll find us. And yeah, we love new subscribers on podcast and YouTube. I think it's great. And we'll just keep putting out the stories. You guys keep listening and watching. That'll be awesome.
Esther, this has been an absolute treat, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you again.
Thank you. It was really fun.
We hope you enjoyed this interview. If there is someone you would like to hear from, a well-known creator, or perhaps someone you feel that gets overlooked, please let us know in the comments, and please check out our playlist of past conversations. We appreciate you all. Please remember to like this episode and subscribe for more content like this. And thank you again for joining us for this episode of Courtroom Confidential Conversations.